Have you ever walked into an office building and noticed that one person just doesn't seem to fit in? The one who quietly blends into the background, moving about the halls unnoticed, keeping to themselves while everyone else is hustling, caught up in the chaos of the workday? Maybe it's the janitor who shows up every morning to clean, taking out the trash, mopping the floors, and keeping everything pristine while the rest of the employees go about their business, oblivious to the person behind the scenes. They seem harmless, right? Just another cog in the machine, doing their job without ever causing a ripple in the water. But what if I told you that this harmless janitor had a secret? A secret that would unravel everything you thought you knew about the company, the people who ran it, and even your own colleagues. Stay with me here, because the truth is, things are never what they seem. You're going to want to stick around for the full story, because by the time you reach the end of this video, everything you thought was safe, comfortable, and predictable is going to be flipped upside down. This is a story about power, deception, and the hidden systems that govern our everyday lives in ways we don't even notice. A story about how sometimes, the most unassuming person in the room holds all the answers. Let's rewind for a second, and I promise you'll want to keep watching. Imagine this, a massive company, one that boasts cutting-edge technology, an innovative team, and ambitious goals. The kind of place where everyone is too busy with their own work to notice anything beyond their little bubble. From the outside, everything looks perfect, professional, and, well, normal. But what happens when someone starts noticing things they shouldn't? What happens when an invisible observer is quietly watching everything unfold? That's where our story begins. You see, the janitor in question didn't just show up to mop the floors. He wasn't there to collect the trash or scrub the windows. No, this was no ordinary janitor. He was there for a much bigger purpose. The real question is, did anyone know who he really was? Did they realize that the person who spent his days sweeping up the mess was actually there to clean up something far bigger? That's the twist you're about to discover. Before you jump to conclusions and assume this is just another one of those corporate espionage stories you've seen 1,000 times before, let me stop you right there. This is different. Way different. Because you see, while everyone else was going about their work, oblivious to the subtle shifts happening around them, one man was gathering the kind of information that would completely dismantle the company from the inside out. He was auditing more than just the books. He was auditing people's behavior, their choices, and the hidden truth that lay beneath the surface of their everyday actions. No one knew. No one suspected a thing. He was a ghost, moving through the building, unnoticed and undisturbed, leaving no trace of his presence behind except for the evidence that would soon come to light in ways no one could have anticipated. Let's talk about our main character for a second. What do you know about a person who works quietly in the shadows? It's easy to dismiss them, isn't it? To assume that because they aren't in the spotlight, they don't have any power or influence. Maybe you've worked with people like that before, people who aren't loud or flashy, but who somehow always seem to be around when something important happens. They might not say much, but they observe. And sometimes, those quiet observers know more than anyone else. That's exactly who this janitor was. His unassuming nature allowed him to gather information without ever drawing attention to himself. It allowed him to get close to the people he needed to observe. And what he learned, well, it would shake the very foundation of everything. So, here's where it gets interesting. How do you uncover the truth in a place where everyone's too busy with their own agendas to even think about what's really going on? How do you take down a company that's built its reputation on transparency, honesty, and efficiency when all of it is a lie? And how does one person, working alone, go about dismantling a whole system without anyone ever realizing it? The answer to all of this, the key to understanding how the janitor was able to pull it off, lies in the most unexpected place. And trust me, it's not what you're thinking. The truth is far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. At this point, you're probably wondering, why did he do it? What was his endgame? Was he driven by vengeance, a thirst for power, or was there something much deeper at play here? Why was he posing as a janitor in the first place, and what did he have to gain from taking down the company? These are the questions you'll get answers to as the story unfolds. But I'm not going to give you everything right away. After all, where would the fun be in that? I want you to stay with me, to feel the tension rise, to let the pieces of the puzzle start to come together in your mind before the big reveal. The truth, as you'll see, is far more layered than it appears on the surface. But before I go any further, let me ask you this. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something isn't quite right? That maybe, just maybe, there's something you've been missing all along? Well, in this story, that feeling will be everything. The small details, the overlooked moments, the things that no one notices, those are the things that will eventually reveal the truth. So stick with me. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss how this all plays out. But here's the kicker, the moment when everything changes. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, just when you think you've cracked the code, something happens. Something so unexpected, so mind-bending, that it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. You'll find yourself sitting on the edge of your seat, eager for the next piece of the puzzle, desperate for answers. And trust me, I'll give them to you. But first, we need to go back and understand how this janitor, this quiet, unassuming figure, became the person who held the keys to everything. How did he start down this path? What led him to take such a drastic step in the first place? You're about to find out. Stay tuned. Because the twist that's coming is going to blow your mind. You're not going to believe what happens next. As the days passed, the janitor moved through the halls of the office like an invisible thread woven into the fabric of the company. To the employees, he was nothing more than a fixture, a quiet, almost forgettable presence, sweeping the floors, wiping down desks, and cleaning the windows. His movements were methodical, deliberate, and routine. But underneath the surface, things were far from routine. For weeks, maybe even months, he'd been quietly observing the flow of daily operations, watching the interactions between departments, taking note of the subtle tensions between employees, the ones they'd never talk about openly. The little things, the hushed whispers in the break room, the fleeting glances exchanged in corridors, the conversations that stopped abruptly whenever someone walked by. It was all starting to add up in ways no one could have predicted. MIA stepped forward, her expression stone cold as she met Emily's gaze. Her silence was deafening, and Emily's stomach churned with the realization that MIA had known more than she had let on. Her betrayal was no longer a whisper in the back of Emily's mind, it was a glaring, undeniable truth. "You've been following the wrong trail, Emily," MIA said, her voice almost soft, but heavy with finality. "It's not about Ethan. It never was." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's really going on here?" MIA took a slow step closer, her eyes now piercing into Emily's like they could see straight through her. "It's bigger than you know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's bigger than all of us. The truth you've been chasing? It's just the tip of the iceberg." For a moment, Emily's world tilted on its axis, the ground shifting beneath her as the weight of Mia's words hit her like a freight train. She had known something was off. She had known they weren't telling her everything, but this was a truth she wasn't ready to face. "Tell me," Emily demanded, her voice shaking with a mixture of desperation and anger. "What are you talking about?" Mia's eyes flickered to Jason, who had yet to move, his gun still resting just inches from her chest. His expression was unreadable, but Emily could feel the heat of the tension building, like the air before a storm. "You were never supposed to be part of this, Emily," MIA continued, her voice low. "They never wanted you to find out. But you kept pushing, kept digging. And now, you're in too deep. What is it?" Emily asked again, her heart pounding. She needed answers. She needed to understand why everything had gone so wrong. "The people you've been investigating, the ones you think are behind Ethan's disappearance, they're just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle." Mia's eyes darkened as she spoke, her voice thick with something that almost sounded like regret. "You've been chasing shadows, Emily. But the real game is something else entirely." A chill ran down Emily's spine. She could feel the weight of the truth closing in on her, but she didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. "Who's behind this?" she asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "Who's really in control?" Mia's lips curled into a tight, bitter smile. "You already know the answer. It's been in front of you the whole time. You just didn't see it." And then, it hit her like a slap to the face, a jarring realization that took her breath away. The pieces fell together with terrifying clarity. The people she had been investigating, the threats, the lies, the betrayals, it all led back to one person, her father. The one person she had trusted more than anyone else. The one person she had believed would always protect her. The realization rocked her to her core. Her father was at the heart of this. He was the mastermind pulling the strings, the one orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. All those hours spent searching for Ethan, for answers, had been a distraction, a way to keep her occupied, to keep her from seeing the truth. Emily had been a pawn in his game all along, just like everyone else. MIA stepped back, watching Emily's reaction carefully. "You're starting to see it, aren't you?" she asked, her voice bitter with truth. "Your father was never just some innocent bystander. He's the one who put all this in motion. Ethan was never the target. You were." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Her father had known. He had known everything. He had played them all for fools. Ethan was nothing more than bait, a tool used to draw Emily into his web. The people she had trusted, the ones who had claimed to want to help her, MIA, Jason, had all been working for him, orchestrating the entire thing. And now, as the truth came crashing down on her, Emily realized the depth of the conspiracy. It wasn't just about her brother. It wasn't just about a missing person. It was about power. Control. And her father had been at the center of it all, pulling the strings from the shadows. But the question that still haunted her was, why? Why had he done this? Why had he dragged her into this twisted web of lies and manipulation? Before she could process the gravity of this revelation, Jason stepped forward, his gun now raised, the cold steel aimed directly at her. "This is your last chance, Emily," he said, his voice harsh, laced with cold finality. "Walk away, and you'll be safe. Keep pushing, and you'll be buried with the rest of them." Emily's pulse raced as she stared at the gun, the reality of her situation crashing down on her with full force. Her father, the one person who had always been her rock, was the architect of her downfall. And now she was faced with an impossible choice: walk away, live in ignorance, and forget everything she had learned, or keep going, keep pushing for the truth, and risk losing everything. She could feel the weight of the gun pressing on her soul, but she also knew that turning away now would mean surrendering to the very forces that had trapped her in this nightmare. "No," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her gut. "I won't stop." Jason's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dark passing over his face. "Then you're already dead, Emily." The words hung in the air, the final, irrevocable warning, as Emily stood there, realizing that she had crossed a line from which there would be no return. The conspiracy was far bigger than she had ever imagined, and the people she had trusted were all part of it. Now, with nowhere left to turn, she was faced with the terrifying reality that the truth would come at a cost, one she might not be able to afford. The stakes had never been higher, the danger never more real. And the question remained: could she survive the truth, or would it destroy her once and for all? Jason didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped back, his eyes lingering on her, and for the briefest moment, Emily thought he might actually say something, reveal something that could change everything. But then, just as quickly, he turned his back to her and gave a single, cold order to MIA. "Get her out of here." And in that moment, Emily knew. The game had changed. There was no way out. No way to win. The only thing left was the truth. But whether it was worth the price, she didn't know yet. "You said." The weight of the situation pressed down on Emily like a vice, her chest tight with fear, uncertainty, and the crushing realization that she was more alone than she had ever been in her life. Jason's gun, now lowered but still within arm's reach, was a constant reminder that she was standing on the edge of a precipice. Her heart thudded loudly in her ears, and every breath felt shallow, like she was suffocating under the weight of her choices. But what exactly was he after? What was his endgame? That's where the mystery began to take shape. To understand the janitor's motivations, we need to step back and look at his life before he arrived at the company. Who was he, really? Where had he come from? And why did he choose this particular company to embed himself in? From the outside, it would seem like he was just another anonymous worker. But his presence in that office wasn't a coincidence, it was part of something far larger, far more calculated. 4 years, he'd been preparing for this moment, learning the ropes, observing the patterns, and identifying the weaknesses in the company's infrastructure. This wasn't just a job for him, it was a mission. But the question remained, who was he working for? What was driving him to carry out such an elaborate plan? It wasn't just the corporate environment that drew him in. No, this company had a reputation, one that masked a much darker underbelly. From the outside, it appeared to be a thriving business, the kind of place everyone dreamed of working for, cutting-edge technology, a booming market, and an attractive salary package that drew in talent from all corners of the world. But behind the polished surface, there were cracks. Big cracks. Employees spoke in whispers about their managers, how some of them played favorites, how promotions seemed to go to those with the right connections, not necessarily the most qualified. There were rumors about financial mismanagement, shady deals that no one wanted to talk about. And, of course, there was the office politics always lurking, always bubbling beneath the surface. What if the janitor had seen the writing on the wall? What if he knew that the company was more than just a business, it was a facade? A facade that needed to be exposed, piece by piece. But not everyone was a suspect. The janitor's role allowed him to see things from a perspective no one else could. While employees spent their days locked in their own bubble, too focused on their screens or their tasks to notice the world around them, he saw everything. He saw how people interacted when they thought no one was watching. He saw who was in and out of the building at odd hours. He noticed which executives had certain employees in their offices longer than they should have been. But even as he pieced these moments together, he began to realize something more troubling. There were patterns emerging, and some of them didn't seem to make sense. One person in particular, Michael, a senior VP with a reputation for being a workaholic, stood out. On the surface, Michael appeared to be the model employee, dedicated, sharp, and always on top of things. But the janitor noticed how Michael would frequently leave his office late at night, looking over his shoulder as if he didn't want anyone to see him. What was he up to? Was he involved in something underhanded? But then there was Sarah, a bright and ambitious project manager, always the first to volunteer for new initiatives. Sarah had quickly gained the trust of her superiors and was rapidly climbing the corporate ladder. She seemed to be on the fast track, her every move being noticed by those in power. But the janitor couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she was letting on. The strange meetings she had with Michael, the way she'd disappear for hours and return with a barely hidden smile on her face, it all seemed too convenient. Was Sarah part of a larger plan? Or was she simply another pawn in a much bigger game? The janitor couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the pieces didn't fit together quite as neatly as they should have. The deeper he dug, the more the situation began to twist. The company's financial statements, which at first seemed perfectly clean, started to raise questions. Small discrepancies, just tiny errors that seemed like nothing more than honest mistakes, began to crop up with alarming frequency. There were a few numbers that didn't add up, transactions that didn't make sense. These weren't things most employees would notice, especially not the ones who had their heads buried in the sand, focusing only on their individual projects and deadlines. But to someone who was watching closely, who had the time and patience to sift through the details, it was becoming clear that something was off. The financials weren't just messy, they were deliberately misdirecting. Whoever was behind this had covered their tracks well, but the janitor's sharp eye and keen attention to detail were starting to uncover the cracks. Yet, just when the janitor thought he was starting to piece it all together, things took an unexpected turn. An anonymous tip was left in his mailbox one morning, just a single piece of paper with a name and a date. The name was someone no one in the company had ever heard of, at least not in any formal capacity, Richard Hayes. And the date? Well, that was the real kicker. It was for an upcoming audit, one that had nothing to do with the janitor's own work. Someone else was getting involved. Someone outside the company who could threaten to expose everything. Now, the tension was palpable. The janitor knew that the clock was ticking. He had only a limited window of time to uncover the truth before things spiraled out of his control. But who was this mysterious Richard Hayes? What did he know, and why had he been brought into the equation? Was he part of the team orchestrating the entire plan? Or was he the very person who could unravel everything the janitor had been working toward? The deeper the janitor dug, the more questions he found himself facing. Each answer seemed to bring up 10 more questions, and the stakes were getting higher by the day. His quiet, methodical work had suddenly turned into a race against time, with no clear winner in sight. Every new lead seemed to push him further into the unknown, and just when he thought he might be getting close, someone or something would throw him off course. The closer he came to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. But one thing was certain, he wasn't backing down now. As the janitor grew closer to unraveling the truth, the world around him seemed to grow more dangerous by the day. The clues were adding up, but they weren't leading to any neat conclusions. Every step he took felt like it was being watched, every move he made, scrutinized. And just when he thought he might have found something concrete, something that could blow the whole conspiracy wide open, an unexpected obstacle would push him 2 steps back. It started with the disappearance of a key piece of evidence. The folder he had so carefully stashed away in the supply closet, the one with all the financial discrepancies, was gone. He hadn't seen anyone near it, hadn't heard any footsteps, but when he opened the drawer, it was empty. For a moment, he wondered if he'd misplaced it, maybe put it somewhere else by accident, but he knew that wasn't the case. He had kept it hidden in a place no one else could possibly know about. Someone had found it, and someone had taken it. And that realization hit him harder than anything before. The absence of the folder was a silent warning. Whoever was pulling the strings was no longer playing passive. This was no longer about sneaking around the office and quietly collecting information. This was personal. Someone knew exactly what he was doing, and they were ready to make sure he didn't get any closer to the truth. His heart raced, the unease creeping up his spine like an invisible threat. But there was no turning back now. He couldn't stop. Not when he was so close. Then, a few days later, it got worse. He was in the break room, pretending to tidy up a countertop, when Sarah, the project manager he'd been eyeing for weeks, approached him. Her smile was warm, almost too warm. She made a light-hearted comment about how the office was looking extra clean today, but there was something in her eyes, something off. A slight flicker of recognition, almost as if she knew exactly what he had been doing. It was subtle, but it was there. And then, as casually as possible, she dropped a line that made his blood run cold. You know, sometimes it's better to leave things alone. Some things are better left hidden, don't you think? Her voice was almost too friendly, too nonchalant. But the message was clear, she was warning him. But why? Was she part of the team that was orchestrating this corporate facade, or was she a pawn too? Her words lingered in his mind long after she'd left the room, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something he didn't. Even more troubling was the anonymous email he received the following day. The message was brief, yet it sent a shiver down his spine. Stop digging or you'll regret it. It was signed with no name, just a single letter. The email had come from a burner address, one he couldn't trace, and it left him with an unsettling sense of vulnerability. Who had sent it? Was it someone within the company who was watching his every move? Was it Michael, the senior VP he'd been suspicious of? Or was it someone even closer, someone who had been playing him from the very beginning? The weight of the message hung heavy on him, like a warning sign he couldn't ignore. He couldn't tell if it was a bluff or a legitimate threat, but one thing was for sure, whoever had sent it knew exactly what he was doing. The pressure was building. Every corner he turned, another obstacle seemed to be in his way. People were starting to act strangely around him. There was a shift in the office energy, a growing tension that hadn't been there before. He could feel it in the way his co-workers looked at him, the way they spoke in hushed tones when they thought he wasn't listening. They weren't just avoiding him, they were actively trying to isolate him. And then came the last blow, a meeting with Michael, of all people. The senior VP had always been a distant figure to him, someone who only appeared in the halls in the rarest of circumstances. But one afternoon, just as the janitor was finishing his shift, Michael called him into his office. It wasn't a formal summons, no, just a casual, almost off-handed request to have a quick word. Michael greeted him with a smile that seemed too rehearsed, too forced. His presence felt like a weight, pressing down on the janitor's chest. The moment the door closed behind him, Michael's demeanor shifted, becoming colder, more calculating. "You've been doing a great job around here," Michael said, leaning back in his chair, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "But I have to ask, what exactly are you looking for?" The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. The janitor didn't answer immediately, trying to gauge if this was a trap. He kept his eyes down, trying to mask any flicker of hesitation, but Michael wasn't fooled. He pressed on, his voice softer now, almost like he was trying to coax out a confession. "People like you, they don't just show up in places like this. You've got to have your reasons, right? What's your angle?" The janitor's heart raced. What did Michael know? Had he been caught? Was this it? His mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, anything that would get him out of the room without revealing what he had been up to. But then, just as quickly as it had started, the tension in the air seemed to dissipate. Michael smiled again, a little too knowingly. "I'm just curious, you know. It's not often you see someone with your dedication around here. But, hey, you've been helpful. Keep up the good work." The words were casual, but the weight of them lingered. The janitor couldn't shake the feeling that Michael was testing him, that he had been playing him like a puppet all along. Maybe Michael had known what he was up to all along. Maybe this was part of a bigger game. The encounter left the janitor with more questions than answers. He couldn't decide if Michael was a potential ally or just another player in a game he didn't fully understand. And then there was Sarah. Was she really warning him to stop, or was she trying to mislead him, playing both sides? Every new interaction, every new clue, felt like it opened up more possibilities while also closing doors on the answers he so desperately needed. He knew he couldn't trust anyone, not fully, not anymore. And just as he was about to make another move, something shocking happened. His phone buzzed with a new notification, a security alert. The company's servers had been hacked. The very information he had been looking for, the files, the evidence, were now at risk of being lost forever. Someone was making sure he couldn't reach the truth, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure he didn't. But who was behind the hack? And why now? Was this a warning? A message from someone he hadn't even considered yet? As the tension mounted, the janitor realized that the stakes had just been raised. The game was no longer just about exposing corporate corruption, it had become something far more dangerous. But with the pieces scattering, and time slipping away, one question remained: who could he trust, and who was just playing him? The clock was ticking, and the truth was slipping through his fingers. But before he could make his next move, a shadow from his past reappeared, one that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew. Just as the janitor was grappling with the new revelations, his world began to spin further out of control when he received an unexpected phone call. The number wasn't one he recognized, but something about the area code struck a deep, uneasy chord with him. It was from a distant relative, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it had a tremor of anxiety that wasn't there before. "You need to stop," the voice said, almost pleading. "They're watching you. Everything you've been doing, everything you've been uncovering, it's not what it seems." His gut twisted. Who was this person to warn him, and why now, of all times? The conversation was brief, the tone urgent, but before he could ask any questions, the line went dead. His head spun. Was this just another distraction, another false lead to throw him off the trail? Or was it something more? The anxiety gnawed at him as he tried to make sense of it. Was it possible that someone from his past had been aware of his mission all along? Or was this a completely different threat, a new player who had a vested interest in ensuring he didn't uncover the truth? It wasn't until a few hours later that the janitor received a text from his sister, who lived in another city. At first glance, the message seemed harmless enough, almost like a casual check-in, but the attachment was a different story altogether. It was a blurry image of the very same office building where he'd been working, with a cryptic message that read, "They know what you're doing." His heart skipped a beat. The fact that she had somehow gotten this image, an image that showed a small, innocuous detail of the company building, set off alarm bells. How did she even know about it? What could this possibly mean? He felt an overwhelming sense of dread flood his chest. Could someone in his family be involved in this entire scheme, working as a silent accomplice, pulling strings from the shadows without him ever suspecting? Or was someone targeting his family to send a more personal message, to scare him into stopping? The timing felt too coincidental, too deliberate. These messages were starting to feel less like warnings and more like calculated moves, as if someone was orchestrating every step he took, playing him like a pawn in a much larger game. But who? Who could be connected to him like this? Someone close enough to know the specifics of what he was doing and yet, so far removed that he hadn't even considered them a part of the puzzle? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the web he had been unraveling wasn't just about the company, it was about his own life, his past, his connections. And there were pieces he hadn't even begun to uncover yet. The next morning, as he arrived at the office, things took another unexpected turn. The usual hum of the office was more tense than usual, and whispers filled the air. Employees walked with their heads down, avoiding eye contact, hurriedly completing tasks without the usual banter. It was as though something had changed overnight, but no one was speaking about it directly. As the janitor moved through the building, he couldn't shake the feeling that everyone knew something he didn't. Was it possible they had already caught on to him, that the threat from his past had become too real, too immediate? But just when he thought it couldn't get any more suffocating, a figure from his past appeared in the hallway, someone he never expected to see again. It was Richard Hayes. The name from the mysterious email. The same man who had been mentioned in the tip-off earlier. The janitor's pulse quickened. He had only seen Hayes in passing at a few high-level meetings, always lingering in the background, never fully engaged, but there nonetheless. He had never suspected that Hayes might be involved in anything shady. But now, as the man walked past him, their eyes briefly met, and there was something unsettling in Hayes' gaze. It was a look that didn't belong in a corporate setting. It was a look that spoke of shared secrets, of things that couldn't be unsaid. It was a look that felt like a warning, one that said, "You're too close to the truth." The janitor's instincts screamed that Hayes was not just another executive, he was a player, a key figure in whatever hidden system was driving the corruption within the company. But what role did he play? Was he part of the conspiracy, or was he an unwitting pawn in the same game the janitor was now fighting against? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Everyone seemed like a suspect, everyone had something to hide, and the more information he uncovered, the less certain he was about anyone's true intentions. Later that afternoon, the janitor returned to the supply closet where he'd been hiding his files only to find it had been ransacked. It wasn't just that the folder with the evidence was gone again, but it was as though someone had been searching for something specific. There was a trail of disarray, papers torn, drawers opened, items scattered on the floor as if someone had turned the place upside down. His stomach dropped. Whoever was behind this was getting closer, and they were starting to make mistakes. But what exactly were they looking for? Had they already found what they needed, or was there something even more damning hidden away in the deepest corners of the office that no one had yet discovered? As if to answer his questions, a new email arrived on his phone. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It was from Sarah. "I know you've been looking into things. I suggest you stop before it's too late." It was chilling, coming from someone he had once thought might be an ally, someone he had considered confiding in. Her tone wasn't just a warning, it felt like an ultimatum. The pieces were starting to come together in a way that felt too uncomfortable to ignore. He had been so focused on uncovering the corporate scheme that he hadn't realized how deeply personal this was becoming. The people he thought he could trust, the ones closest to him, were turning into suspects in ways he never anticipated. Sarah's involvement now felt like more than coincidence. The deeper he dug, the more it seemed like everyone around him had their own secrets, their own hidden agendas. Who could he trust when even those closest to him were starting to distance themselves, or worse, actively trying to silence him? The tension had never been higher, and with each passing hour, it became clear that the janitor was caught in something far bigger than a corporate conspiracy. What started as a quiet investigation into one company's wrongdoing had spiraled into a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with far too many players, and too many hidden motives. The truth was just out of reach, but the danger of uncovering it was more real than ever. And as the janitor looked around, he couldn't help but wonder, was he too deep into this now to back out? Or was the truth already so far buried that even he couldn't survive what was coming next? "You said." The pounding of his heart echoed in his ears as the janitor stood frozen in the dim hallway, his mind racing to process everything Sarah had just told him. For a moment, everything around him felt distant, unreal. The office, once just a place of routine and mundane tasks, now felt like a labyrinth of hidden motives, veiled threats, and sinister forces at play. As Sarah hurriedly pulled him toward the back exit, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong, that they weren't just trying to escape the building but were being hunted. The weight of her words, the sudden, frantic look in her eyes, sent a cold shiver down his spine. It wasn't just the company that was out to get him now. Someone wanted him silenced. But who? And why? The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and for a brief, terrifying second, he thought he heard a faint sound, a soft shuffle of footsteps just beyond the door. He stopped, his breath caught in his chest. No. No way. It's just in my head, he tried to tell himself. But deep down, he knew he wasn't imagining it. They were being followed. He could feel it. A sense of dread gripped him as his eyes darted nervously to the end of the hallway, his pulse hammering in his temples. There was no one there. No sign of movement. But the nagging feeling that someone, or something, was watching him intensified with each passing second. Sarah's grip tightened on his arm, pulling him away from the door and deeper into the shadows. Her face was ashen, her movements frantic, almost robotic in their urgency. "Come on, we have to go now," she whispered harshly, glancing over her shoulder. "There's no time. You don't understand. If they find out I've talked to you, if they know you know too much, they'll..." Before she could finish, a sudden loud crash from down the hall broke the tense silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots pounding against the floor. The janitor's heart stopped. Someone was coming. Someone was coming fast. "Get down," Sarah hissed, yanking him into an alcove near the back of the building. His body moved on instinct, crouching low as the footsteps grew louder, closer. The pounding in his chest drowned out everything else. They know, he thought, panic swirling in his gut. He turned to Sarah, but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the door, her eyes wide with terror. For a split second, he thought she might say something that would explain it all, but then her lips moved, but no sound came out. She was frozen, her gaze locked on something outside the alcove. He followed her line of sight, his stomach sinking into his shoes. A figure. Standing just outside the door. Watching them. He couldn't make out the details, but the silhouette was unmistakably human. Tall. Broad-shouldered. A shadow moving within shadows. And then, just like that, it vanished. Gone. As if it had never been there at all. For a moment, they both stayed still, holding their breath, as if the mere act of exhaling might give them away. Then, Sarah's voice broke through the silence, barely a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." But the urgency in her voice only deepened the panic within him. He nodded silently, motioning for her to lead the way. The closer they got to the exit, the more his mind raced. The footsteps, the figure in the shadows, it all felt like a nightmare. Was it paranoia? Was his mind playing tricks on him, or was he truly being targeted by something much bigger than he'd ever imagined? As they reached the back door, a sudden loud bang echoed from the hallway behind them, followed by the sound of hurried voices. They weren't alone anymore. Someone else had entered the building. "Hurry," Sarah urged, pushing him through the door into the alleyway. But just as they stepped outside, the night air slammed into them like a wall, cold and biting. They were exposed. Open. Vulnerable. And then, just as he turned to check the alley behind them, something hit him in the chest, hard. His breath was knocked out of him as he stumbled backward, almost falling to the ground. He looked down in confusion. There, on the pavement, was a small, crumpled envelope. No return address. No markings. Just a thick, heavy piece of paper. Sarah's hand shot out to stop him from bending down to pick it up. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "Don't touch it. It's a message. And if you open it, you're going to be in even more danger than you already are." His heart raced as he stared at the envelope, his mind trying to make sense of it. Who would leave something like this for me? But before he could ask, a car screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. The headlights blinded them, and the engine roared, louder and more menacing than it had any right to be. The air seemed to freeze around him as the car's doors slammed open, and a group of figures emerged from the shadows. They moved quickly, efficiently, their faces hidden by dark masks. It was as though they had been waiting for this moment, ready to pounce. Sarah's grip on his arm tightened to the point of pain as she dragged him toward the nearest side street, away from the car. "We can't let them catch us," she muttered, her voice shaking with fear. "We can't." But before she could finish, the screeching of tires and the sound of heavy footsteps behind them cut through the air, drowning out everything else. The janitor's mind was spinning, every possible escape route flicking through his brain at lightning speed, but none of them seemed real, none of them felt safe. How did they find us? How did they know? His pulse hammered in his ears as he tried to process everything. Sarah had been right all along. It wasn't just about uncovering the company's secrets, it was about surviving the truth. The truth that someone wanted him dead. Someone who had orchestrated all of this, pulled him into the chaos. But who? And why? It felt as though the walls were closing in on him from all sides, the tension growing thicker, suffocating. His breath came in sharp gasps as he tried to force himself to think. Who could have done this? Then, in the distance, a voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. "Don't let them get away." The figures were getting closer, their footsteps fast and synchronized, and the janitor knew with a terrifying certainty that there was no escaping them. His entire body was on high alert now, every instinct screaming at him to run faster, to hide, to disappear, but deep down, he knew the truth. It was too late. There was no running. There was no hiding. And no matter how fast they moved, how many twists and turns they made, the walls were closing in. He was already too deep in the game. And then, just when he thought things couldn't get worse, he heard it, the sound of a phone buzzing in his pocket. He had forgotten about the envelope. Forgotten about the message it might contain. But now, the buzz felt like the final nail in the coffin, something he wasn't ready to confront. As his hand shook while reaching for the phone, his mind screamed, what was in that envelope? What was the message? The tension in the air was suffocating, and the janitor felt it more than ever as he walked back into the office after a sleepless night of trying to piece together the puzzle. His mind was a whirlwind of suspicions, each thought tangled with another, each lead growing colder and more frustrating. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching him. Every corner he turned, every whisper he overheard, made him question his own judgment. It was almost as if the deeper he dug, the more questions appeared, and no matter how many pieces he put together, the bigger the puzzle seemed to grow. It was during one of these moments, when he was standing by the break room, sorting through papers in an attempt to find something concrete, that his world took a sudden, horrifying turn. Sarah walked in, her face pale, but her steps slow and deliberate, as if she was carrying the weight of something that could break her. He tried to act casual, to mask his growing sense of unease, but he couldn't ignore the look in her eyes. Something had changed in her, something subtle but profound, like she was a different person altogether. As she closed the door behind her, she didn't even smile. "We need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't the friendly, concerned tone he was used to. This was something colder, darker. His heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew that whatever was coming would change everything. "What is it, Sarah?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though he could feel the anxiety creeping up his throat. She hesitated, looking over her shoulder as if to make sure no one else was around. Then, with a deep breath, she leaned in closer, her eyes darting around the room as if she feared someone might hear them. "It's not what you think. I'm not warning you to stop because I want you to back off, I'm telling you to stop because I've been ordered to make sure you don't find out what's really going on." The words hit him like a slap to the face. For a moment, he couldn't process them. "What do you mean? Ordered by who?" Sarah's expression twisted in pain. She looked as though she wanted to say more, but the words seemed to be stuck in her throat. Finally, after a long pause, she exhaled and shook her head, as if deciding she had no choice but to say it all. "It's all a setup. Everything you've been looking into, everything you think you've uncovered, it's been designed to lead you here. To this point. They wanted you to find out, just not the way you think." She took a step back, her eyes filling with guilt. "I wasn't just warning you for your safety, I was trying to protect you from the truth." The janitor's mind reeled. "Protect me from the truth? What are you talking about? I'm not some pawn in some game." I'm trying to expose what's really going on here. Sarah's face paled even further. That's what you think you're doing. But that's the lie they've been feeding you all along. You're not some innocent bystander in this, you're a part of it. And so am I. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, her words laced with a level of betrayal he hadn't been prepared for. You were never meant to find the truth. You were meant to find the pieces they wanted you to find, and believe that you were on the right path. But everything you've been uncovering, all the evidence, it was planted. It was meant to lead you in circles. And now you're walking straight into their trap. The words barely registered, as though they were too heavy to comprehend. He had spent all this time thinking he was uncovering a vast conspiracy, digging deeper into the corruption that he believed was eating away at the company. But now Sarah was telling him that it was all a facade. Every step he had taken, every lead he had followed, had been orchestrated, calculated to steer him toward a truth that wasn't really the truth at all. His mind raced, trying to process this new reality. How could this be? You're saying everything I've discovered is fake? That all of it was planted for me to find? His voice was shaking with disbelief, the ground beneath him shifting as the story he thought he knew began to unravel. Sarah nodded slowly, a tear escaping from the corner of her eye. They've been manipulating you. You think the people you're suspicious of, Michael, Richard, even the others, are the ones controlling everything. But they're not. You've been chasing ghosts, and now you're part of the plan. You were supposed to get close, to see what you think you're seeing, and then expose it all. But the truth is, the company's real agenda has nothing to do with corruption. The files you've been finding, the evidence, it's all been carefully crafted to make you think there's a conspiracy. But there's something else going on here. Something bigger. And you've walked right into it. The janitor felt a chill creep up his spine as he tried to absorb her words. Everything he had believed, everything he had risked for, suddenly felt like a lie. His entire investigation, his mission, was it all for nothing? Was this all a game to someone else, someone pulling the strings behind the scenes? But before he could ask her more questions, Sarah quickly turned and grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back door of the break room. We don't have time. If they find out I told you, if they know you're onto them, they'll do more than just shut you down. You need to leave. Right now. Trust me. Her urgency was enough to make him hesitate, but it also made his instincts scream that something wasn't right. Was she trying to protect him, or was she just another part of the puzzle he had been piecing together all along? He didn't know who to trust anymore. The thought that everyone around him could be part of this web, that they had all been playing their parts, was more terrifying than the initial conspiracy he had believed was true. And as Sarah pulled him closer to the exit, her grip tightening with a kind of desperate fear, one thought gnawed at him. If everything was a setup, then who was really behind it all? And, more importantly, why had they chosen him? Why now? The truth, it seemed, was more elusive than ever, and every person in the company, every friendly face, every ally, was beginning to look like a suspect. The real question was no longer what was going on, but who was orchestrating it, and for what purpose? And just as he was about to demand more answers, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Sarah's grip loosened, her eyes darting to the door with terror in her gaze. Someone was coming. And for the first time, the janitor realized that his every move had been anticipated, and it was too late to turn back. The night seemed to stretch on forever as the janitor stood frozen in the alleyway, his hand trembling over the phone. The buzzing in his pocket was like an ominous countdown, each second slipping away faster than the last, and the weight of it pressed on him with suffocating intensity. Behind him, the sound of hurried footsteps and the distant screech of tires grew louder, closing in from all sides. His pulse was a chaotic drumbeat in his ears, but he couldn't bring himself to move. Something told him that once he picked up that phone, everything would change. The door to the unknown would swing wide open, and whatever lay on the other side would alter the course of his life in ways he wasn't ready to face. He hesitated, his mind whirling, when he felt Sarah's hand on his arm. "Don't pick it up," she whispered urgently, her breath shallow, her voice thick with fear. "Whatever it is, you don't want to know. You're in too deep already." Her words hit him like a cold slap. In too deep already? He had spent the past few days unraveling what he thought was a vast, dangerous conspiracy, But now Sarah was telling him it was too late to back out? That there was no way out at all? The logic of it hit him hard, but the emotional weight was even worse. Sarah had been his only ally in this twisted mess, the only person who seemed to care about his safety. And yet, now she was warning him against finding out what was hidden in that envelope, against answering the phone. His gut twisted in two directions at once. Was she trying to protect him, or was she part of the trap, luring him deeper into a game he couldn't control? What do you mean by that? His voice cracked, the words almost too hard to say. Sarah, what's going on here? Why are they after me? Why is everyone lying to me? His heart ached with frustration, with betrayal. He had trusted her, and now everything felt like it was crumbling to dust. Sarah's face crumpled, her eyes filling with unshed tears. She looked like she was about to break, the weight of whatever was happening between them too heavy to bear. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted any of this. But there's no going back. You need to understand that. She stopped, taking a shaky breath before she continued, each word as painful as the last. I'm involved in this, we're involved in this, and you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't understand how dangerous they are. You think you're after some corporate corruption? You think you're exposing some vast conspiracy? No, this is bigger than that. This is about something else entirely. Something none of us can control. The words landed like bricks, each one heavier than the last. His mind swirled in confusion. We're involved in this. How was she involved? How had she been a part of something so much darker than he had ever imagined? His eyes searched hers desperately, trying to find the woman he thought he knew, trying to make sense of the broken, terrified expression on her face. But there was no clarity, only more questions, more layers to the mystery that he couldn't unravel. Tell me what's going on, Sarah, he whispered, his voice hoarse with the desperation that had taken root inside him. Please. I don't want to keep running around in the dark. Just tell me the truth. The air between them was thick with tension, every word heavy with meaning, and for a moment, Sarah just stared at him. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she knew more than she was saying, but she was terrified to speak it aloud. He could feel the weight of that silence, and it crushed him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she exhaled sharply, her face falling into a mask of resignation. I can't protect you anymore, she whispered, barely audible. They'll be here soon, and you have to make a choice. You need to decide if you want to live, or if you want the truth. His heart pounded as the words sank in. Live or the truth? The two options seemed impossible, each one carrying consequences he wasn't prepared for. How could he choose between his safety and the truth? The truth had brought him here, had made him question everything he believed, but it had also put him in the crosshairs of people who would stop at nothing to silence him. On the other hand, turning his back on the truth felt like giving up everything he stood for, everything he had been fighting to uncover. Was there a middle ground? Could he survive this, and still find the answers he needed? Or was it already too late for that? He cut himself off, shaking his head. The decision felt impossible. But the sounds behind them were growing louder now, the rush of feet, the clink of heavy boots on pavement. Time was running out. He looked around desperately, his mind a storm of possibilities. What if Sarah was lying? What if she wasn't trying to protect him but was simply trying to control him, to lead him further into whatever this web was? What if the envelope contained the final piece to the puzzle, the one thing he needed to put it all together? But if he opened it, if he picked up that phone, could he ever go back? Before he could decide, a sharp, cold voice sliced through the tension, and they both froze. You should have listened to her, the voice said, low and menacing. It's too late now. The figure stepped out from the shadows, just beyond the alley entrance. His face was obscured by a hood, but the silhouette was unmistakable. It was Michael. The man who had seemed like an ally, the one who had helped him at every turn, had been nothing more than a pawn in this game, his motivations just as murky as the rest of them. Michael's eyes were dark, filled with a coldness that made the janitor's skin crawl. You think you're the first to try to dig into things? You think you're the only one who's been playing with fire? He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You have no idea how deep this goes. No idea what you're really up against. Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. Michael, please, you don't have to do this. He doesn't know what he's getting into. Oh, I think he knows exactly what he's getting into, Michael replied, his tone laced with dark amusement. He's been warned. He's been given the chance to walk away. But now, his eyes narrowed as he fixed the janitor with a piercing stare. Now he gets to face the consequences. And so do you, Sarah. The weight of those words hit like a ton of bricks. Michael was threatening both of them now. The decision was no longer just about truth versus survival, it was about who to trust, who would betray them next, and whether they would make it out alive. The stakes had escalated beyond anything the janitor had imagined, and now, he was forced to confront a terrifying reality. He was up against more than just a corrupt company or a conspiracy. He was facing a dangerous, far-reaching force that was willing to eliminate anyone who stood in its way, and there was no guarantee that he or Sarah would survive it. Make your choice, Michael continued, stepping closer, his presence suffocating. What will it be? The truth, or your life? But know this, no matter what you choose, you won't walk away unscathed. The truth always has a cost. As Michael's words lingered in the cold night air, the janitor felt his stomach churn with fear. The question now wasn't just what to choose, it was how far he was willing to go to survive the answers he had already uncovered. And as the figures behind Michael moved forward, it was clear that whatever he decided, the game was far from over. The moment Michael's words settled into the air, the janitor felt the ground beneath him shift, like the very foundation of his understanding had been cracked open. His breath came in shallow gasps, his thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and dread. For so long, he had believed he was digging into the heart of a corrupt company, unraveling secrets that were hidden beneath layers of lies and deceit. But what Michael was saying, what Michael was hinting at, made it clear that the conspiracy was far deeper, far more expansive, than he ever imagined. It wasn't just about the company. It wasn't just about corporate malfeasance. It was about something much bigger, something that involved more people than he could even begin to fathom. Stop hiding, Sarah, Michael sneered, his voice cold and deliberate. You think you've got him fooled, don't you? You think you're still protecting him? But you know as well as I do, there's no way out of this. Not anymore. The words hit Sarah like a slap. She froze, her expression faltering for just a split second, just enough to make the janitor's stomach twist with suspicion. Everything she'd said, everything she'd promised about protecting him, suddenly felt like a web of half-truths. He looked at her, eyes wide, his heart hammering in his chest. Sarah. What is he talking about? His voice was tight with fear. He didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to hear the answer, but the pressure was unbearable. What are you hiding? What aren't you telling me? She closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if gathering the strength to face the truth she had been running from. When she finally opened them, the vulnerability he had seen before was gone. Replaced with a cold resolve. I never wanted you involved in this, but now you are. And you need to know the truth, or they'll kill you, they'll kill us all. Her words hit like a punch to the gut, raw and unfiltered. Michael wasn't lying. This isn't just about a few corrupt executives. This goes higher, much higher, than anything you could have imagined. His chest tightened. Higher? What did she mean? The office had seemed like the epicenter of everything, a labyrinth of deceit, but now she was talking about something that stretched beyond even that. Something that could reach into places he'd never thought to look. It's bigger than the company. The people pulling the strings, they have reach everywhere, Sarah continued, her voice shaking. It's not just about money or power. It's about control. Control over everything. Over all of us. The weight of her words crashed down on him. His eyes shot back to Michael, who stood there, almost smug, like he was watching a puppet struggling against its strings. Who are they, Sarah? Who the hell are you talking about? He had to know. This was no longer a game. This wasn't some petty office drama anymore. They were up against something far more sinister, something that could destroy them both. The government, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. The ones with the money, the ones with the power to make sure no one ever uncovers the truth. A chill washed over him. The government. How could this have anything to do with them? He had thought, at most, This was a rogue operation within a corrupt company, but now it sounded like they were tangled in something much darker, something that was pulling strings on a global scale. This couldn't be real. Could it? But before he could process it, Michael stepped forward, his grin widening. You really think she's telling you the whole truth? She doesn't even know half of it. The people who really control everything, they have eyes everywhere. We've been watching you from the start, ever since you showed up at that company. Every move you made, every question you asked, it's all been part of the plan. You were never just some random janitor. You were always part of this, whether you knew it or not. The world tilted beneath him. Part of this? What the hell was he talking about? His mind raced, but it couldn't keep up. This was too much. Everything had been a lie, his entire existence here had been manipulated, engineered. He had been playing right into their hands. But why? What had they wanted with him? No, Sarah interjected, her voice sharp. That's not true. I never wanted you to be involved in any of this, and I never wanted anyone else to get hurt. But I don't have a choice anymore. Michael laughed, a cruel, hollow sound that echoed in the alley. You think there's ever a choice? There's never a choice. You've been part of this since the moment you walked into that office. The only way out now is to play by their rules, or you end up just like everyone else who's tried to get out, disappeared, erased. And trust me, we've erased a lot of people. The implication hit him like a freight train. Erased. The people who had tried to expose this conspiracy, the ones who had come before him, they hadn't just been silenced, they had been disappeared. His legs wobbled under the weight of it all. He was standing on the edge of something vast, a bottomless pit that could swallow him whole, and there was no way back. No way to turn around. No way to fight it. His mind snapped back to Sarah. She was shaking now, her eyes wide with fear, and the desperation in her voice made his gut twist. Please, she pleaded, you don't understand. They've had control of everything for years before any of this even started. I thought I could protect you. I thought I could keep you safe from it all. But now, her voice trailed off, and she took a step back, as if the weight of the situation was too much to bear. Now you can't protect anyone, Michael shot back, his words venomous. Not anymore. This game is over, Sarah. There's no going back. The janitor's heart pounded against his chest, his mind racing for a solution, for an escape. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't trust either of them now. Not Sarah, not Michael. The conspiracy had spread its tendrils so far, so deep, that it felt like there was no escape, no safe place left to run. The fear coursed through his veins like a poison, slow and steady, choking him with its grip. But then, something clicked in his mind, a thought, a single idea that pushed through the fog of terror. He didn't have to play by their rules. He didn't have to follow their game. He was already in too deep, so what did he have left to lose? He wasn't just going to roll over. He wasn't just going to let this thing swallow him whole without a fight. But in that moment, the stakes shifted again. It wasn't just his life at risk anymore. He looked between Michael and Sarah, his mind whirling with 1,000 thoughts. He wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. He was fighting for his survival. And survival meant making the hardest choice of all, trusting no one. The rain had started to fall again, steady and unrelenting, as the janitor stood at the entrance of the abandoned warehouse, every inch of his body tense with anticipation. He could feel it, this was the moment everything would be decided. No more half-truths. No more running. Tonight, he would get the answers. Tonight, he would face whatever waited for him inside and finally uncover the truth, no matter the cost. He could hear the distant sounds of footsteps echoing in the darkness behind him. Sarah. Michael. They were both there, too, but they weren't with him, not anymore. It wasn't about alliances anymore, or which side was right or wrong. It was just him, alone, walking into the heart of the storm that had been brewing ever since that first day. He had been a pawn, a cog in their game, but now he was the one who would make the final move. The door creaked open with a groan as he pushed it, revealing the vast, empty interior of the warehouse. The shadows seemed to swallow him whole as he stepped inside, the dim light from his flashlight barely cutting through the thick darkness. The air was thick with dust, The smell of old machinery and decaying wood mingling with the metallic tang of fear that hung in the air. The place was silent, almost too silent, as if it were waiting for something. Or someone. His heart pounded against his ribcage, the only sound filling his ears as he crept deeper into the cavernous space. He had to find it. The final piece. The key to everything. The envelope Sarah had warned him about, the one that had started it all, was still tucked safely in his jacket pocket, the content still a mystery, still unspoken. The answers were in there, he knew it. But there was something else, something deeper, something he hadn't quite realized until now. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. This was about survival. Suddenly, he heard a voice, soft at first, but unmistakable. It was Sarah. "Turn around," she said, her voice strained. "You shouldn't have come here. You don't understand what you're up against." He froze. The coldness in her voice made his blood run cold. He had trusted her. He had believed her. But now, with everything hanging on the line, he wasn't so sure anymore. "I trusted you," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the stillness. "I thought you were on my side. But now I don't know who I can trust." He turned slowly, and there she was, standing in the shadows, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Fear. Regret. Or something darker, more sinister. She stepped forward, her movements slow, calculated, as if every step were measured. "You were never meant to know the truth," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I tried to protect you. I really did. But you couldn't stop. You couldn't leave it alone, and now," she trailed off, her words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "You knew from the start," he accused, his chest tight with betrayal. "You were part of it all along. You didn't want to protect me. You wanted to control me. You wanted to use me." She didn't flinch. Instead, she nodded. "Yes. And I'm sorry, but you need to understand, you were part of this from the very beginning. They chose you. Not me. You think this is about a corrupt company, about exposing fraud. No. This is about power. Control. And now you're too deep to walk away." He felt the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. She had known. She had always known. But it wasn't just about the company or the conspiracy, it was about him. He had been the key. And now, with that realization, everything began to fall into place. The company wasn't the enemy, it was only a small piece of the puzzle. The real game was much, much bigger. The government, the corporations, the secret organizations pulling the strings, they were all working together. And they had been grooming him for this moment. Suddenly, the air shifted, and a cold chill ran down his spine. He wasn't alone anymore. Michael appeared from the shadows, his expression unreadable, his eyes burning with the intensity of someone who knew far more than he was willing to let on. "You should have stayed out of this," Michael said, his voice low and steady. "You had a chance. But now, you've ruined everything." The janitor took a step back, his mind racing. He was surrounded. Trapped between two people he thought he could trust. Two people who had been playing him from the start. "You don't get it," Michael continued, his voice growing colder. "This isn't just about you. It's about control. The information in that envelope. It's a key, but not just any key. It's the key to taking down the entire operation. If you open it, if you expose what's inside, everything changes. The balance shifts. And trust me, no one can afford that. Not the people in power, and certainly not us." His heart skipped a beat. The envelope. The key. It all seemed too much. Too impossible. And yet, in his gut, he knew it was true. The weight of everything, the lies, the manipulation, the danger, was crushing him. The truth was right there, waiting to be uncovered, but it came with a price. It always did. "I don't care about your game anymore," the janitor spat, his voice trembling with defiance. "I'm not going to be your pawn." "You're already too far gone," Michael said, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can walk away from this? You think you can undo everything you've done? You're a part of it now, whether you like it or not." Just as the tension seemed unbearable, Sarah stepped forward again, her eyes locked onto his. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, almost pleading. "We can still protect you. You don't need to open it. We can find a way out together. He looked at her, his heart torn between the woman who had once shown him kindness and the cold, calculating reality of what she was a part of. She had been lying to him. She had been hiding the truth. But the truth was staring him in the face now, undeniable. There was no way out. In that moment, everything changed. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope. He knew what was inside. It was time. Time to end this. But before he could tear it open, a blinding light flooded the room. Everything froze. The sound of footsteps, loud and deliberate, rang through the warehouse. A new figure stepped forward, their face hidden beneath a mask. You think you understand, don't you? The voice said, deep and unsettling. You've been playing right into our hands the whole time. But the real game? It's only just beginning. The janitor's stomach dropped. He had thought he was holding the final piece of the puzzle, but now, he realized he was holding the first. The game had never been about what he had uncovered. It had always been about what he hadn't. And as the figure stepped into the light, the true mastermind of it all, someone he had never suspected, someone he had once trusted, smiled, and everything he thought he knew was turned upside down. The morning after everything had exploded, the city looked the same. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the skyline in hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows over the streets below. But to the janitor, everything had changed. The world felt different now, as if the veil had been lifted, and he could see the truth he'd spent months, maybe years, searching for. He had discovered so much more than just the company's dark secrets. He had uncovered the lengths to which people would go for power, the manipulation, the deceit, the way everything was connected in a web of lies and half-truths. But in the end, all of that had been merely a small piece of something far larger. The people he'd trusted, the ones who had guided him, had all been players in a game much bigger than he could have ever imagined. And yet, despite everything, despite the betrayals and the threats and the endless manipulation, he had come out the other side. The envelope had contained the final piece, the one thing that could have torn everything apart. But when the masked figure revealed themselves, it was too late. The game had changed. The rules had shifted, and in that moment, the janitor knew that opening the envelope wouldn't have been the end of the game. It would have been the beginning of a much darker chapter. So, instead of tearing it open, he had made a choice. A choice that wasn't just about survival, but about taking control of his own fate. He'd walked away from the truth, from the unraveling conspiracy, and let the pieces fall where they may. Sarah had disappeared that night. He'd never seen her again, and he didn't know what had happened to her. Michael had been caught in the crossfire, his role in everything exposed to the people who had been pulling the strings all along. The system had shifted, yes, but in a way he didn't fully understand, and the weight of that unknown still pressed down on him. The world kept spinning, the machinery of power churning forward, but somehow, he was no longer a part of it. He had chosen his own path, and in doing so, he had freed himself from the chains that had bound him for so long. Now, as he walked through the familiar streets of the city, everything felt distant, almost surreal. The faces he passed by, the ordinary people going about their daily lives, seemed unaware of the shadows that had loomed over him for so long. He had been one of them, once a simple man, an invisible cog in a machine. But now, he knew too much. And the knowledge left a hollow space inside him, a gap that couldn't be filled, no matter how much time passed. The world was full of mysteries, of things that were beyond his understanding, and he had learned that some truths were better left buried. He had taken a step back from the darkness, but he knew it wasn't over. The conspiracy was still out there, still growing, still pulling at the threads of society, even if he couldn't see it anymore. The danger still loomed, but it wasn't his fight anymore. He had chosen to walk away, and that choice, in its own way, had granted him freedom. But as the day wore on, a nagging feeling tugged at the edges of his mind. A piece of the puzzle that had never quite fit, something Sarah had said, something Michael had alluded to, kept gnawing at him. He hadn't been the only one in the game, and maybe he never had been. The people who had set all of this in motion were still out there, watching, waiting for their next move. And that knowledge, that lingering sense of unfinished business, would never fully leave him. As he passed the old office building, the one that had started it all, He glanced up at the windows, empty, dark, silent, and for the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. He was free. But the world would always be full of shadows, always shifting, always hiding something just out of sight. As he turned the corner and stepped into the bustling crowd, he knew one thing for sure: some mysteries were meant to stay mysteries. The truth, he realized, wasn't something you always needed to uncover. Sometimes, the question itself was the answer. And as the crowd moved around him, his heart heavy with the weight of everything he had learned, he couldn't help but wonder if the world he had just left behind would ever truly be exposed for what it was. And in the deepest, darkest corner of his mind, there was a small, gnawing fear: what if he had just stepped out of one trap, only to walk straight into another? The final twist, the one that lingered in his mind, was something he could never quite shake: the feeling that, somewhere, somehow, the conspiracy was still watching him. Waiting. The credits rolled in his mind as the city continued to move around him. He was free. But in the back of his mind, the story was far from over.